What do we do when we're in the face of so much uncertainty?
Well, when you are in the face of so much uncertainty, which we all are right now, what you have to do is you have to win the battle that you can win, which is the battle with your own mind. You see, you can't control what governments are going to do. You can't control the price of oil. You can't control what COVID-19 is going to do. You can't control what's going to happen a month from now, 2 months from now. You can only control what you're doing right here, right now. And so if you have the propensity to get triggered by the unknown, which most human beings do, you have to fight to focus on the stuff you do know. So right now in this moment, you know what I know? I know that if you're watching this conversation, you're safe. I know that you have access to the internet. I know that you're still alive. And so safety and health is the number one thing that if you have that covered, you can focus on this moment and bringing your mind back to this moment and saying, I may not know what's going to happen. I may not like how people are handling it, but I do know that I am safe right now and that I will be able to face whatever is coming. When you start to get into the pattern and the habit of spinning thoughts about what's coming, you will lose the battle with your mind. Your health will tank, your mood will tank, your relationships will tank, your outlook will tank. It all begins with making a decision that you are not going to allow that shit in your mind. That is the one thing that you can control. And what's happening for so many people right now is that our moods and our decisions and our thought patterns actually begin in our bodies. So our nervous systems are hardwired to trigger certain thinking patterns. And it dates back to patterns that you learned when you were a kid. So if uncertainty for you as a kid meant, uh-oh, is dad coming home and drunk? And do I need to be on edge? And I get hyper vigilant so that I don't get in the crosshairs? Or maybe uncertainty was, uh-oh, mom seems a little critical. Is she disappointed? Is she upset? Am I going to get in trouble? And so you developed this propensity to start to worry about what's coming. The second, as an adult, you get into a situation where you start to feel like you don't know what's coming, before your mind even realizes it, your nervous system recognizes it because your mind may have forgotten the pattern, but your body sure remembers it. And boom, this kind of habitual worrying can take over like that. So you're not only dealing with the triggers that are in the present moment, you're dealing with past patterns of thinking, whether it's worry or anxiety, or it's perfectionism or procrastination or hypervigilance or assuming something bad is going to happen, whatever it may be, that is getting triggered for people at a profound level. And so what I want to do today with you is I want to give you some simple tools so that you can create some psychological distance, just a micro moment between the thing that triggers you. Let's create a little moment, a pause, if you will, where you can have self-awareness and where you can insert a moment of control and then hand you the tools to redirect your mind to something positive. Because here's what I know. This isn't going to last forever. I know that oil prices may momentarily tank, but when we flatten the curve, we will go back to life and people will need oil. I know that there's going to be a lot of people that really suffer because they lose their jobs or they lose their homes or they are struggling to find the basic supplies. One good thing about what's happening right now is this is not happening just to you. This is a global crisis and there are a tremendous number of resources out there. So you can focus on all the shit that you can't control, or you can focus on this moment and the fact that right now you're healthy and okay. And then you can develop a mantra from this moment to remind yourself to calm your ass down and focus on the fact that if something bad happens, you will face it then.
I love that response. I love that. What is this tool? I'm curious to know now. What is this tool that you're going to teach us? Can we get into that?
Yes. So the first thing that I want everybody to do is you've got to be able to see or name the thing if you want to tame it. So if you just take out a piece of paper and you write down everything on a simple piece of paper or in a notebook that triggers you to worry, to feel anxious, to be uncertain, that's number one, because part of what we need to teach you to do is you can see this stuff coming. If you don't label all the things that trigger you, then what's going to happen is your nervous system gets triggered, which then takes you into a worry and an anxiety, a fight or flight adrenaline response that hijacks your mind. And before you know it, your thoughts are scrambling and it's hard to bring yourself down once your thoughts go haywire. So I want you to write down all the things. For me, my biggest moments of anxiety are first thing in the morning. And I have tremendous experience with this personally. So I struggled with anxiety for 25 years. I was medicated for it. The medication saved my life. I had such severe postpartum depression when our first daughter was born, who's now 21, that I couldn't be left alone with her. That's how scary it was. So my expertise comes not from studying this, it's from living this and having to figure out how to save my own ass from my own mind. And about 6 years ago, I started using something I called the 5-second rule to interrupt my thoughts that were negative, that would send me spiraling, and drag my mind to consciousness, to the prefrontal cortex in 5 seconds flat. And I trained myself to start to rewire my own patterns of nervous system gets triggered, my mind goes haywire. I interrupt it using what I call the 5-second rule. I'm going to teach it to you in a second. I draw my focus back to my prefrontal cortex, which gives me immediate control of what I'm thinking. And boom, I drop in what I call an anchor thought to anchor myself down. So the first step of this is I want you to write down everything that triggers you. For me, waking up to a new day where there's a lot of uncertainty or something's going on, facing all of that is where my anxiety comes. And, I hit rock bottom in my life 11 years ago. My husband was in the restaurant business. It was going under. We were $800,000 in debt, about to lose the house. I was drinking way too much because numbing your problems is the easiest way to deal with them, but it backfires. Go ahead.
So Mel, this situation you're in, I mean, this situation the world is in, you've been here. Because I read your bio when your husband was starting that pizza restaurant and you guys were $800,000 in the hole, almost losing your money, almost losing all your savings.
No money. I mean, I couldn't pay for groceries. The bankruptcy letters were coming. The car was about to be repossessed. We had 3 kids. I was unemployed. It was so bad. I could not get my ass out of bed. I was 41 years old and I never thought that my life would turn out like this. Just like, look, you didn't choose to be in this situation with this pandemic, but you can choose how you build a response to it. And that's where I need you to focus all of your energy, all of your thoughts, that you didn't choose this anxiety crock pot we're all cooking in, but we can choose how we insulate ourselves from the uncertainty and we build emotional resilience and we ground our minds. And so I couldn't get out of bed. I mean, I would hit that snooze button.
How long ago was this, Mel?
11 years. Wow. So I couldn't get out of bed. The alarm would ring. I'd hit the snooze button 4 or 5 times. My mind would be full of all of the problems, all of the uncertainty. How the fuck am I going to get out of this? I'm the worst mother. The kids have missed the bus. I hate my husband. I'm a failure. All of it. It was like the weighted blanket psychologically keeping me in bed. And so my life changed, and you can change your life with one decision. In fact, I think we're all just one decision away from a totally different life. And if you make the decision today, after watching this and listening to this, to change how you think, your whole life will change. And so what happened for me is one night I was watching TV and I was giving myself this little pep talk, like, all right, I got to pull it together. I got to stop drinking. I got to find a job. I got to stop screaming at my husband. I got to start talking to my friends. I got to do something. I got to change. And I see this rocket ship launch across the television screen. And it gave me this crazy idea that maybe if I launched myself out of bed, if I move fast enough, maybe I'd move fast enough and I'd be gone before the anxiety and depression hit. Maybe there was a window of time where you could move before the anxiety and depression, boom, takes you down. Now, look, I had 4 Manhattans that night, so I was pretty plowed because it sounds like a stupid idea. You know what I'm saying? But for whatever reason, I'll never forget it. It was a Tuesday morning in February outside of Boston, Massachusetts. That alarm went off. And here's the thing I want everybody to understand. Your whole life comes down to micro changes. And these changes happen in a 5-second window. There's a 5-second window between feeling the terror of this moment and finding courage, or feeling the terror of this moment and having a panic attack. There's a 5-second window between feeling motivated to go for a walk or to sit down and focus. And 5 seconds later, you've talked yourself out of it. Everything happens in this 5-second window, and that's where the power is. So that morning, Tuesday in February, 11 years ago, the alarm goes off. Now, I immediately remembered I should get out of bed. Just like you know exactly what you should be doing, or the small things that will make your day a little bit better. I knew it, but then this 5-second moment of hesitation opens up. And I started thinking about what I needed to do instead of doing it. And that's where all of the emotion and all the anxiety and all the depression, it comes right into this 5-second moment of hesitation. I could feel myself reaching for the snooze button because it was a habit. I did it every single morning as avoidance and denial and numbing. But then I did something that I'd never done in my life. I started counting backwards, just like the space programs do when they launch a rocket. Works in any language, only works if you count backwards, does not work if you count up. Started counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just like a rocket launch. And boom, I stood up. It was this craziest thing. And that was that. The next morning, I used it again. The next morning, I used it again. By the third morning, I thought this is very weird. But I was so desperate, I said, instead of getting resigned and cynical, why don't you just test this thing? Anytime you're in a moment, Mel, where you don't feel like doing something, or you're emotionally triggered, or procrastination's kicking in, or fear or anxiety, just count backwards. Let's see what happens. I'll be damned. Counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It made me pick up the phone and start looking for a job. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I put the booze over here and walked in that direction. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I settle my nervous system. Instead of screaming at my husband, Chris, I'm able to talk to him calmly. Using this tool, my whole life changed. Now, I never intended to tell anybody because it sounds stupid and I didn't know why it worked. No idea. And that all changed in 2011 when I was asked to give that TEDx talk. Now, by this point, I had gotten a job. Chris's restaurants were turning around because he was using the 5-second rule to make the courageous decisions that he had been avoiding. Everything was great. And somebody asked me to give a talk about finding a new job, about careers, about goals. That was the TEDx talk. I used the 5-second rule for 3 years to change my own life. I used it in secret. I didn't talk about it. It was a little self-coaching tool that was just incredible. It gives you instant motivation, instant courage, instant 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 push that you need to do the things that will change your life. So I get asked to give a TEDx talk about how you change your career. It was not about the 5-second rule. That was the first speech I'd ever given in my life. If you want to know what it looks like to have a 21-minute long panic attack, watch my TED talk. If you look closely.
For people who are going to be looking for this TED Talk, is this the one called How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over?
Yes.
Amazing.
And I
22 million views. Amazing.
Yes, you can watch it. I literally have a bright red rash on my neck as I'm talking. All the anxiety coming. I forgot how to end the thing. I casually mentioned the 5-second rule at the end because I forgot what I was supposed to talk about. A year goes by. Nothing changes in my life. And all of a sudden somebody reaches out on Facebook and asked me to speak. And they said that they had seen the speech in San Francisco. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, it's on Facebook. I'm like, it's on Facebook. They had put it on Facebook. It had like 1 million views. So I started being asked to speak about the 5-second rule, and it became this organic phenomenon. And, I spoke for free about it for a couple of years, and then I realized everybody at these events but me was getting paid, and I'm a moron. And about 4 years ago, or 5 years ago now, I started speaking professionally, and I became the most booked female speaker in the world.
What?
And
Congratulations. That is
thank you.
amazing.
Thank you. 111 speeches in 2018. And then we focused on launching a talk show. But so the thing about the 5-second rule is it's not mine, it's for the world. And what I'm really excited and why I'm excited to come back to teaching it to you and how you use it with identifying triggers and with anchor thoughts is it's way more than a motivational tool. It is a weapon that you can use against programming in your mind that you want to upgrade. And here's how you're going to use it. Because it's being used by healthcare practitioners in psychiatric practices. It's being used in inpatient settings in psychiatric hospitals. It is being used by pediatricians to help kids with anxiety. It's being used by veterans organizations to help people with PTSD. It is a fundamental science-backed tool that is classified as a starting ritual in habit research. A starting ritual is something you can use to trick your own mind. See, all of the negative shit that you do, whether it's procrastinating or worrying or anxiety, it's all stored right here in this part of your brain. This part of your brain automates all your behavior. Any negative pattern that you feel like you don't want anymore in your life, we can interrupt that pattern and we can replace it with a new pattern. But first you got to learn to interrupt the pattern. And so what happens when you use the 5-second rule is counting backwards does something really powerful. When you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it requires focus when you first start using it, which is this puppy right here, the prefrontal cortex. When you count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the counting draws your focus to your prefrontal cortex and awakens it. So by the time you get to 1, the part of the brain that is responsible for courage, for learning new behavior, for strategic decision-making, and for being intentional and conscious has just woken up. The act of counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is an intentional act that interrupts a pattern of worrying or a pattern of negative self-talk or a pattern of anxiety that's automated. The act of counting is the first thing you choose to do to say, screw you, I'm not going to listen to that. By the time you get to 1, your mind is now primed to receive different information because it's ready to focus on something. So when you identify all the triggers that trigger you to feel anxious or worry or out of control right now, what you're now going to do is we're going to come up with a pattern that we want to replace. Because if your coping mechanism for anxiety in the morning is to lie in bed and to feel anxious as hell and to start getting depressed and then to sleep till noon, we want to replace that with getting up and getting out of bed and getting outside. And this change is going to happen in a 5-second window. So we identify the trigger. I feel depressed. I stay in bed. I oversleep. I don't get up. Then I wake up and feel horrible. Okay, that's the trigger, the morning, the alarm goes off. Great. We're going to use the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to replace it with a different behavior that you've already planned. I'm getting up. It doesn't matter how I feel. I'm getting up. It might be that your coping mechanism is to hit the bong or to drink too much at night because that's the only way you can get your mind to quiet down, right? Because we all are feeling something right now called moral fatigue. Have you heard this term before? Moral fatigue, really important to understand. If you feel like you're more exhausted than ever and you don't understand why because you're just sitting on your ass all day, let me tell you why you're exhausted right now, like exhausted in your bones, and why at the end of the day, you just want to numb out. So here's why. A month or 2 months ago, depending upon where you live in the world, going to the store and buying milk was a very automated proposition. You got to the store, walked in, you got your milk, you left. Now it requires complex processing. It requires your prefrontal cortex to fire up and go, okay, wait, do I have a mask? Do I have supplies? Is the store going to be open? Is there going to be a line? As you're driving along or riding your bike or walking, you see all these people with their masks on and it feels dystopian and weird and people are frowning and it feels scary. And then you go into the store and you're thinking, should I touch this? Should I not touch this? Should I pull out my money? Is there going to be milk? Did somebody touch the milk thing? Should I decontaminate? Does a virus live on plastic? Is it cold? Is it not cold? Should I say hi to this person? Am I standing too close to the cash register? Why can't I come up to the thing? When is this going to end? So by the time you get home, you've basically taken a standardized test. Your mind is like, oh, God. So if you're having a hard time focusing right now, it's because of what they call moral fatigue. Your mind is having to make big moral calls about every small aspect of life right now. It is gassing you. Your brain is so out of fuel. Your mind is so tired. So your butt may be in the same chair all day long. Your mind has just run 4 marathons. It's exhausted. So if you notice that you're making unhealthy choices or that you worry the most at night, that's a trigger. So the sun going down might be a trigger. It's a huge trigger for a lot of people. You want to know why? The reason why the sun going down is a huge trigger for a lot of people is that's when they're typically, if you grew up in a house with a lot of conflict, the fighting happened at night. So parents coming home from work puts you in a state, whether you realize it or not, of feeling on edge, that something's coming. And so it can be very hard for people that grew up in households with a lot of trauma and conflict to relax at night, which is why it's easy to reach for the booze or the weed or the whatever to zone out. And so instead you could go to Mind Valley and do one of the yoga classes. You could make it a practice that you're going to watch a whole series of documentaries instead, that you're going to have a choice in place because you know the trigger's coming. Now, when it comes to worry, what you need to do is, again, this comes to one of the things that I've been doing is when I notice that my mind starts to go too far in the future, because lately this is what I've been worried about. And this is a very, this is a luxurious worry. But the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, oh my God, what happens if our 21-year-old and our 19-year-old can't go back to college this fall? That is going to be a nightmare for me because they're going to be here in the house and I'm going to be, but I think about also, when am I going to get back on the speaking circuit? When am I going to be able to be out with people at events? When are we going to be able to get back to things? When I start to go there and I start to feel a level of spinning, I catch myself because it's not going to serve me to worry. That's what everybody needs to understand. Your worrying is not helping you. It's hurting you. And so when I notice my own mind start to go to that place, I use the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's like going, giving yourself, your brain a little slap. I awaken this. And then at my desk, I'm not sitting at my desk because we went to my mother-in-law's place in Vermont, but I have a photo of Lake Michigan. I grew up in Muskegon, Michigan, and the state park there is on Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes here in the United States. And it's a beautiful freshwater lake with sand dunes and seagrass, just beautiful. And so I have a photo of it. And the reason why I have a photo of it is because it is a visual anchor that reminds me that better days are coming. It's a visual anchor that reminds me that when all of this is over and we flatten the curve together and I emerge back into public life, the first place I'm going to go is to see my folks. And I'm going to walk out onto that beach. And so everybody should think about what is the one thing you want to do when this is over that you can't do right now?
You know, I want to travel. I want to get on stage again. I want to speak again. I've had so many, just like you, I was supposed to speak at South by Southwest and so many amazing events. All of that got dashed.
So pick one. I want everybody to pick one. So you pick. Okay, so South by Southwest. So what I want you to do is I want you to find an image of a particular stage, because I know there's millions of them there, that you really see yourself, or the sea of people, or the big thing. But the vision that really represents that moment when you are out in public with that many people able to share all of these amazing ideas and talk about this incredible community that you've built. And what you'll notice is that our minds are like boats. And if a boat isn't anchored, it will go with a current and drift away. And the current right now everywhere is extraordinarily negative. Nobody needs to turn on the news. You don't. I can tell you what's happening. People are dying. You're supposed to stay in your house, and we're working on finding a test and a vaccine. That's it.
Right.
Other than that, there's nothing else new going on. That's it. Believe me, when the stay-at-home orders are lifted, everybody will text you. You don't have to have the news on. But the current right now is super duper negative. And so it's easy to have your mind drift. So you need things to anchor you. A photo of the thing you're going to do, like your photo of South by Southwest and my photo of the shores of Lake Michigan, that is what they call an environmental trigger. That positive environmental trigger anchors your mind in the positive thought that this is going to pass. This is temporary. I'm going to get through this. And when I do, I'm going to go do this thing that I care about. That brings you back into being able to be in the moment and remind yourself, I'm okay. And when something happens that I need to worry about, that's when I'll worry about it. But right now I'm okay, and this is temporary. And that, by simply redirecting your mind all day long, you will train your brain, no joke, to start to spot the positive, optimistic things, even in this moment.
How do we bring that list into this whole approach? So there was the list, there's the 5-second rule, and then there's that trigger, that positive trigger. How do we put all three of these tools together?
Excellent question. So number one, you're going to make a list of everything that triggers you. It could be the time of day. It could be a thought. It could be a certain news headline. It could be a certain thought, worried that maybe your mom or your dad is going to get this, or somebody that you love. Could be a thought. A lot of people I've noticed have a lot of thoughts right now about their own health. Mm-hmm. And so that's that. Whatever the trigger is that causes you to start to worry, write them all down. So now you know they're coming. Whenever one of them hits your brain, you're drifting down the negative current. Use the 5-second rule, count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to anchor yourself back down. Now, on the list of triggers that you have, what you're going to do is you're going to write down either an alternative thought. Hey, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Right now I'm safe. If I have to worry about, I'll worry about it when it happens. Saying it's not going to happen is not a great reframe, because most people don't believe that. They're worried it's going to happen. So you're going to write down your triggers.
Yeah, give me an example with you. Okay, so for example, for me, a worrying thought is, I don't know when my kid's school is going to open again, right? Okay. And you're wondering the same thing. When are your kids going to be allowed to go back to college? So that would be one of the things that's worrying us. What would be the positive vision to that?
Okay, so the way that I've handled that, and again, you got to figure out what triggers you and what's going to ground you back into the present, is I don't need to know right now. At some point it's going to reopen and they'll go back then. What I've done is I've said in my mind, they're going back in January. And that means that since there's so much uncertainty, you can hack certainty 2 ways. One is creating a daily routine that gives you certainty right now, because you can count on your routine being predictable, and predictability gives you emotional safety. 2, you can create your own milestones based on what you know from the World Health Organization and based on your own critical thinking. Me personally, I don't think there's any coming out of this where I live until mid-July, maybe. And I don't think there's any way, given that my daughters go to big universities, that they will be ready this fall. So my mind goes, I'm not even thinking about it, because I think it's January 1. Right. And if it happens sooner, fantastic. Now, what I say to my kids is this. I say, look, your whole life changed dramatically in the last 6 weeks. And school doesn't reopen for another 3 or 4 months. The smartest people on the planet are working on this problem. And so if your life can change for the negative in 6 weeks. It could also change in the positive in the next 6 weeks. We just don't know. But just feel good knowing the smartest people in the world are all working on the same problem. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah, that's really true. And that gives me so much hope. Just before you, I was speaking to Stephen Kotler, the famous writer and futurist, and he said never before in the history of science and humanity have we had this many of the world's talent working together to solve one singular problem.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, now, so we have the list. Yep. We have that future vision, whether it's speaking on a particular stage or our kids going back to school. How do we apply the 5-second rule?
So when you feel yourself getting triggered, so think about when you get triggered, you typically feel it in your body first. Is it the pit in your stomach? Is it the heart racing? Is it the hair on end? What is it? Start to identify that, the thoughts that swirl. The second you feel that coming on, we're interrupting that response. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then drop in whatever thought you're replacing the worry with. My kids are going to go back in January. I don't need to worry about this.
Right. I like that. It's so simple, yet so effective.
Well, the reason why is because you're planning this ahead of time. You see what triggers you coming. And then you have a plan to replace it before it escalates and hijacks your ability to think. Because the more stressed out you get from worrying, cortisol floods your mind, makes it really, really difficult to engage your prefrontal cortex, makes it very difficult to focus on anything else. So we want to see it coming, use the 5-second rule to interrupt the automated nature of it and engage your prefrontal cortex before cortisol takes over. And because you have a go-to thought, you'll be able to switch it up immediately. Having the go-to thought is critical. Look, I heard from a COVID-19 ICU nurse who's using this same exact method all day long to keep herself from succumbing to terror and emotional overwhelm. And what triggers her, they have to wear like double and triple layers right now in the ICU COVID units. And so it's super hot and really suffocating because you're so bundled up and nobody can really see your face. And so when she walks into a patient's room and they shut the door behind her, she gets a surge. I don't know if I can handle this. She has an immediate trigger that I got to run. This is too much. I feel like I'm suffocating. What if I bring this back to my family? She's using 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 all day long to close the window on the terror, take a deep breath, and move forward toward the checklist. And that's how she's getting through her day. And it's working because she has a plan knowing it's coming. See, most of us hate our anxiety and our worry and our fears so much that when we feel it coming up, we're like, oh shit, here it is. Oh, I don't want to feel it. And then we get all worked up because we're feeling anxious again, which only makes it worse. So this is a simple 3-step plan. List of triggers, 5-second rule, and a list of things you're going to think of instead. And now you're equipped to have the emotional resilience and the mental flexibility to switch gears so you can take control.
The question is, how do you deal with the anxiety that comes from waking up and being on a roll and realizing that when you're making things happen, it's easy to look back and realize how much of your life you wasted. And that makes you present to how potentially little time you have left and how much there is to do in the little time that you have. I can so relate to this. The few things I want to say about this is that I don't think that our experience of feeling anxiety about getting it all done before your life is over, or getting it all done in the time that you have, I don't think it's unique. I think that that is something that starts to happen when you feel like your life is on a roll and you're not present to misery, but you're actually present to power and joy and all the cool possible things that you could do. Does the anxiety, or how do you make the anxiety go away? I don't think you can. I think that that is a very normal thing to feel when you're a big thinker and you become present to the fact that when you put in the work And when you focus, you really are capable of creating just about whatever you want in your life. And that's both empowering and daunting and terrifying as hell. And so you can't get away from that anxiety, but you can respond to the trigger. I often feel what you're talking about when I'm on an airplane. And maybe it's because I feel very vulnerable and out of control when I get on a plane and I click the buckle and I realize this puppy could go down. And then I think about, okay, I spent 49 years here. There's so much more I wanted to do. So I can relate to this. So there's two things to this. One is being present to time passing and the fact that we're all gonna die and that your life is a gift. When you get present to that, that's the biggest motivator on the planet. And when you feel one of those moments, what I do is I shrink it down and I try to find something in this moment that I'm incredibly grateful for, so that if it were to end right now, then all would be well. I think about the sunset I'm looking at. I find a picture of my kids and my husband. I think about, the lives that have been touched by the 5-second rule. And that gratitude in the moment allows my mind to not go psycho thinking about the big vastness around life and those big topics. So that calms me down immediately. That's number one. Number two, I think a slightly different question than, it's probably anxiety, but I think it has more to do with momentum and how when you start to get unstuck and you start to see things happening, you'll notice that things feel like they start moving faster, as if you are on a treadmill and somebody has secretly come up and turned it up on you. And there are days where we're moving through our day, like this morning was one of them. We're getting ready for this live training, and all of a sudden I caught myself almost about ready to hyperventilate because I wasn't present to this. I was present to what happens when we have 1,000 people show up and where are we gonna hold, you kind of speed it up on yourself. So when that happens, I know that I'm in the future, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I need to be right here and right now. And that when you start having big things happen and when you start feeling unstuck and when things start moving, the momentum, because an object in motion tends to stay in motion, your anxiety will make it roll faster. That will not make you effective. You have to slow it down immediately. Just in the case of getting overwhelmed by the big themes in life, when you start to feel like things are going too fast, oh my God, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time. No, yes, you do. Slow it down, okay? I'm always looking for new ways to explain the power of the 5-second rule and the power of 5-second decisions. And I read something that Tim Ferriss said that really resonated with me. And he had this one line buried in a podcast somewhere that just jumped out, and it's stuck. And what he said something about how there's a gap between the world and the things that trigger you and your response. And your entire life is that gap. When you start to, this is not what he said, he kind of identified this gap, and I, of course, intrinsically was like, well, absolutely, that's the 5-second window between instinct or stimulus and your reaction. And when you start to understand that your whole life plays out in this 5-second gap, and that there's a gap that's 5 seconds long between fear and courage, and there's a gap that's 5 seconds long between self-doubt and confidence, that is your life. And what's super cool about understanding that your whole life is inside this gap is it's so small, everybody, that you have the ability to control it. Life's always gonna throw triggers at you, and there will always be all kinds of cool things that inspire you, your wisdom, and you get to choose what happens in that gap. Do you succumb to an excuse, or do you push yourself forward? When you start to speak up in business, you'll be shocked at how you start to speak up in your relationships. When you start to make hard phone calls, whether it's in a selling situation, you'll be surprised at how you'll start to close the gap and have hard conversations in your personal life. And so that gap is everywhere, and it's the same everywhere. And when you start to go to work in controlling how you live in that gap between stimulus or idea and your response, that's where the magic is. And that's what you're experiencing.
This is how you manifest properly, by the way. Right here. You have to visualize in your mind writing the check and feeling the pain in your legs of uncertainty. You have to visualize in your mind, sitting in that plane seat, flying to a conference, feeling the pit in your stomach, being worried about whether or not anyone's going to take you seriously because there's all these big podcasters there. You need to feel your chest contract and squeeze in as you walk up to somebody that you deeply admire and you start a conversation, or you walk up to an event organizer and say, I'd like to apply to be on a panel next year. How do I do that? And your chest gets really tight because you feel like you don't belong there because you don't have the numbers yet, or whatever your stupid story is. When you picture that in your mind and you feel the negative sensation in your body, you are doing resistance training. This is how you align your mind, body, and spirit to not resist the hard stuff. Here's a cool fact about your brain. Your brain doesn't know the difference between you actually spending the money, buying the plane ticket, getting on the plane and flying to that event, or you imagining it in your mind. And when you run through the hard things that you're avoiding in your mind and you allow yourself to feel the negative sensation in your body, you are training and mentally rehearsing the exact same way Olympic athletes do with the 9 sports psychologists that the U.S. Olympic team has to help our athletes prepare. You are mentally rehearsing before the actual event so that your mind and your body are trained to anticipate and push right on through all the stuff that's scary because you've already rehearsed it. That's how you use manifesting to help you do the work to get what you want.
Wow. I'm so grateful that we kind of brought that up and that you helped walk me through this.
What did you get out of that?
Well, I became aware of not only what I need to do, but like what's the fear that's attached to it.
What is the fear?
Well, the fear is always going to be uncertainty or scarcity, because I think the one thing that's been beneficial to me in my life is that I've always had my back against the wall from being somebody who was a convicted felon in jail, not growing up with a ton of money, that sort of thing, where I've always been forced to just hustle, work, where I'm used to this kind of situation. But on the flip side, the negative is I'm so used to being stressed because I grew up in a stressful environment. I put myself in a stressful environment from selling drugs and doing drugs for a majority of my life when I was younger, so that a lot of times now I've had to become aware of when I'm creating more stress around something that's a good thing instead of something that I would have seen back in the day as something that was bad or whatever.
Can I unpack that?
Sure.
So you just said that you realize that you're used to having your back up against the wall. That having been a kid that grew up in a very chaotic household, who then turned to dealing drugs, who then got arrested and was convicted as a felon and served time behind bars, all of which I'm very familiar with because I used to be a public defender in Manhattan. So I have not served time, but I have represented people accused of crimes and who have committed crimes and who have served time for a large part of my career. And one of the things that I want to point out is that you were attracted to the chaos of selling drugs because it's all you knew as a kid in your home and it felt familiar. And this is why it can be really challenging to break old patterns. And that's because patterns are familiar. And if they're familiar, they just repeat automatically without you even realizing it. And so here you are now. How many years have you been out of jail?
Gosh, so December 26th just marked 13 years.
So 13 years. On December 26th, it was 13 years since you were released from federal prison.
or
Amazing.
or county jail. Yeah, but
okay, well, county jail.
yeah.
It's still a felony conviction.
Yep.
13 years. You're behind bars. You have turned your entire life around, but there is one pattern that still runs your life. And the pattern that runs your life is chaos. And if you don't identify that chaos and friction and feeling on edge is what you're so familiar with, if you don't identify that now and recognize all the places in your business where you are creating chaos, creating friction, and putting yourself on edge, that pattern will keep you from living into your full potential. And so here's what I would do. I would make a list of every aspect of your daily life or business that creates chaos, that causes friction internally, or leaves you feeling on edge. And then I would do the work this year to put systems, people, process in place so that you create new patterns. I can relate to this so profoundly, not because I've served time behind bars, but because, like so many people, having stored trauma from being molested as a kid, when I was 9 years old, in my nervous system, I have lived my whole life from the age of 9 till about 46 when I first started understanding that this was stored trauma and understanding that my anxiety was largely due to the fact that when that happened to me at the age of 9, my nervous system went from calm and cool and resting to on edge, stressed out, fight or flight. And it probably never flipped off of that. My dominant pattern, Doug, is being busy and being on the run and being on the move, because if I can be 2 or 3 steps ahead of everybody else, I'm going to be safe. And so the thing that doesn't work in my life is that my whole business, up until very recently, was organized around a pattern that's Mel's running to catch a plane. Mel's running to do this. Mel's on the move. And I hated how it felt, but I had no idea how to stop being so busy and stop being on the run, because I equated being on the run with safety and with control. And it's the opposite. You see, these patterns that we develop when we're a kid made us feel safe when we were a kid because they were familiar. But now that they're an adult, they're screwing up our lives. And so I have gone through the same exercise very recently. What are all the things in my business and that I'm doing in my day-to-day life that I hate? What are the things that cause friction? Where are there, where is this behavior making me miserable? And now I am going to work with removing all the friction, removing all the busyness. And I'm going to tell you first of all, what are you getting out of me sharing this?
Well, I'm very thankful because my audience is going to totally relate to this. And that's kind of why I shared what I shared, because there's so many people that struggle with this very thing. And I was very fortunate that I was in a therapist's office probably, I don't remember, 6 or 7 years ago. And I was stressed and I had nothing to be stressed about. I was making good money. I was writing books, and I had just written my first book, and my therapist was like, what was your childhood like? I was like, my parents got divorced. And I just started explaining what happened. She's like, you grew up in chaos. So like you said, your nervous system is going to seek out more chaos. And then it began to make sense, because she was like, you have a certain level of homeostasis that your body is used to, and your body is always going to revert back to that. You have to create a new normal. And I was fortunate that I learned, I'm still aware of it. And I think just through, I'm aware of it, and I still make mistakes based on it just because I'm still working through a lot of that. But there's a lot of people that, as you're saying that, they never figure it out because they're like, they just accept the fact they're always going to be stressed.
You don't have to be. Like, I think the place, if you want to heal, if you want to be happier, the place to really focus all your work on is regulating your nervous system. And there's lots of ways you can do it. You can do it through cold exposure therapy. by climbing into an ice bath and learning how to breathe yourself through the discomfort for 30 seconds to a minute. You can do it through EMDR. You can do it through guided psychedelic therapies, with a licensed therapist. But you're not going to talk yourself out of a nervous system response. You can also put your hands on your heart. This is something I write about in the High Five Habit, and press on your vagus nerve and say, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm loved, which will bring you back into your body, and it'll flip the switch between your fight or flight sympathetic nervous system back into the parasympathetic nervous system. And so there are things you can do, but understand that these patterns get triggered at an emotional nervous system level before your brain catches up. And so the reason why, for example, when I asked you, hey, visualize yourself writing a check that's scary, and you said, I feel that in my legs, that's your nervous system. That's where your stored tension, trauma, and stress activates. It can be different for everybody. And so, back to the advice I was giving you, you have to write down all the areas where you are unknowingly creating chaos. And I remember this person said something to me when I first got involved in the speaking business, and my career started to take off. And he said, Mel, you better say yes to every speech you can get, because speakers on the corporate circuit get hot and then they disappear. And this is a fad. And that triggered that, I got to go, 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 go. And so for 5 years, I said yes to absolutely everything I possibly could, because my husband and I were in a horrendous financial situation and we desperately needed the money. And I ran myself into the ground, not because I was being intentional, but because this pattern of being busy kicked into full gear, but it was driven by fear. It was driven by fear. And I believe that as much work as you have done on yourself, turning your whole life around and now serving so many people and making a huge difference in building this business, if you dig deep, what drives the fear of spending the money and investing yourself is a deeper fear.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And it's forcing me, or just thinking about it now, it's forcing me to just to reinforce that the work never stops. Like, there's always going to be something that comes up. And I think a lot of people think of healing as they climb this mountain, they put a stake in the ground, they're like, yep, that's it, I'm done. And it's not what happens. And I think that's why a lot of people, they stay stuck and they develop this fixed mindset, because they don't have the humility to look in the mirror and say, I need to improve this. This area of my life needs some healing. I need to do some work. And we touched on obviously some things that I need to work on personally, and both personally and professionally. But I guess my question back to you is, so the High Five Habit's been out now for several months. We just got through the holidays. What's been something recently since the book came out where you've had to give yourself a high five and pick yourself back up after you were in a negative self-talk loop, you were feeling low about yourself? Was there something? And if so, what was it?
It's basically every day.
Yeah.
You just said you've written the High Five Habit. It's a wildly successful book. Is there a moment that you have to pick yourself back up? The reason why I start every day with a high five in the mirror as part of my morning routine, and I do it I've repeated it so many times, I don't even think about it, because it's just like brushing my teeth. I brush my teeth. I wouldn't even think about starting my day without brushing my teeth. I wouldn't think about starting my day without high-fiving myself in the mirror and experiencing the benefit neurologically and chemically to what it does. I need one every day. Life is fucking hard. I mean, just this week, I have one daughter who has started a new job after graduating from college, having had 2 years of her college experience imploded. And she is starting remote at a large tech company. She is
profoundly capable, and she's a nervous wreck. And that makes me feel sad and distracted and upset for her. We have another daughter who is a junior in college and which basically means she's had 6 months of a traditional college experience, who just got word that school is now pushed back a week. It's starting remote, that Rush is online, just things that seem trivial, but it's her whole world. And so her trying to grapple with how to make sense of the ever-changing world that we live in. I was supposed to fly down and see my parents who are on the panhandle of Florida this weekend. And given the surge that we're in the middle of, I think I need to push this thing off because there's connections involved and I don't want to spend the weekend in the airport. And it's a lot of money to fly down there right now. And not that I don't have it, but I'm kind of feeling like, God, I don't want to disappoint my mom, but I really don't want to spend 2 days in an airport. And what do I do? And so it's like, Mel, come on, make the phone call. Every single day, life is going to throw situations, emotions, distractions, stuff at you that you can't control. And the whole game is how you support yourself in responding to it. And so I have developed the skill of being so in tune with my nervous system. And when I'm kind of in my body and feeling comfortable in my own skin, and when I am triggered and I go on edge. And the second I feel myself go on edge, I have a skill of putting myself in pause, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and checking in with myself and getting aware of what is going on. And let's take the example of why, the high five helped this morning of feeling on edge about calling my parents, who we haven't seen since end of September, and saying, I think we should push this off 3 weeks. It's my mother's birthday. I deeply miss them. I want to see them. And I know in my heart the right decision is to push this off a couple weeks. And yet I still feel the emotional trigger. Am I going to disappoint somebody? Does that mean I'm a bad daughter? Am I a selfish jerk for doing this? All of which could either settle in and put me on edge all day, or I could recognize that's what happens and go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not thinking about that. I'm going to do what works and what feels right for me. I know I'm a good daughter. And I know that this is the right decision. And my mom and dad can have their reaction. And when I see them 3 weeks from now, when there are less flight delays and the weather is better and I have more time to spend with them, we won't even remember the moment I made the phone call and said. So every single day, you have to practice these skills because life is always changing. Like, that's why I like thinking about it like skills. Writing words on a piece of paper is a skill. You use it every day. Scrolling through your phone is a skill. You use it and practice it every single day. Drinking a cup of water is a skill. You use it and practice every single day. Self-awareness is a skill. Recognizing when you're on edge is a skill. Knowing how to come and get back into your body and become aware of what's triggering you and then work through it and choose how to respond based on your values, that's a skill. And in life, you need to draw upon, strengthen, and practice these types of skills every single day.
So beautifully said. And thank you so much for opening up and sharing that. Because I think that's something that a lot of people, especially the last few years, have struggled with. It's people pleasing, right? Like being afraid of doing the right thing for themselves because they fear it's going to hurt somebody else. And then also regulating yourself and not creating more stress in your life, which then, you and I have both struggled with coping with substances, to help numb anxiety, stress, and that's not good either. And there's a lot of people that do that. So if you were to say you had like one or two things other than the 5-second rule that when you're feeling emotionally charged, you give yourself the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you do something to kind of get your, body back to some sort of stability, like what would those things be?
Okay, so in a moment of stress, what are the top tools that you can use? I can think of a number of them. You already mentioned the first one. So the first one is the 5-second rule. Simply counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, interrupts your nervous system response and it interrupts the racing thoughts. And it gives you just a moment where you can choose what you do next. And so you could count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and take an action to respond. Or what I often do is I count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to stop the racing in my mind and to stop my heart from taking off in terms of flooding my body, with adrenaline and cortisol and all this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I put myself in pause. I take a deep breath and I just do nothing for a minute. Deciding not to react is a powerful way to react. Gathering yourself is a power move. And so that's number one. The second thing that you can do in moments where you get triggered or stressed or you feel the emotional wave come on, get outside, put your phone in your back pocket, preferably turn it off, and take a walk. Simply getting outside for 10 minutes will slow your breathing down. It will raise your gaze and attention on something other than the whatever situation, train wreck that just happened, or the phone call you need to make, or the text you just got. A 10-minute walk outside will work wonders in settling your mind and your body. A third thing that you can do is you can get out a blank piece of paper and you can do what I call a brain dump. Get all that crap that you're thinking out of your mind and just write and write and write, just as if you are barfing after a big night of drinking. Just barf it all out on a piece of paper. Get it out of your head. And as you stop writing, ask yourself, anything else? And just keep writing. And it'll just be a mishmash of stuff, but eventually you'll get it out of your head and your body and you will calm down. A fourth thing that you can do, if you have a bathtub, you can draw a bath, and soaking in a hot tub will stimulate your vagus nerve and it will settle your body. A fifth thing that you could do is you can run a cold shower and step into a cold shower. Let me tell you something. I don't care how horrible that text was that your ex just sent you. If you step into a cold shower, it is so shocking that the only thing that your brain and your nervous system will pay attention to is the cold shower. Get in there and stand in there for 30 seconds to a minute and breathe through it. And something miraculous will happen. You will literally feel a flood wash over your body. Those are 5 free things that you can do that will help you take control in a moment where life has triggered you and made you scared or anxious or freaked out or whatever. This is the new reality. Let's stop pretending there is some sort of milestone that is out in the future that's going to solve all this. And let's get strategic and let's get intentional about how we're going to work.
You talk frequently and openly on your social media and in your books about your own struggle with anxiety and panic disorders, and I don't mean to put you on the spot for that, but is there anything you would follow up with that would help our audience of millions of people around the world that perhaps have a colleague or a spouse or their boss or an employee, child that perhaps is facing some of those issues, or they themselves as well, that would maybe give everybody a light and some inspiration this morning?
Yeah, of course. So I would tackle it in two different ways. I'd tackle it in two different ways when you're dealing with somebody at work, especially if you're the manager or the leader at work, and somebody in your personal life. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's really important to be compassionate and understanding and supportive of, everybody in your life. But I'm not out to turn leaders and managers or anybody into a therapist. Because the fact of the matter is, when somebody's struggling, whether they're struggling with anxiety or depression, or they're struggling with issues related to trauma or PTSD, or heck, they're just struggling because we're still living through a global pandemic, and every single human being's nervous system right now has been switched into a state of fight or flight. And so, everybody, after 2 years of this, Scott, is living in a condition in their bodies that human beings are not designed to live in. We all feel emotionally taxed. We all feel the fatigue from being on Zoom conference calls all day long. We all feel the giant, are you kidding me? As we see the virus continue to mutate and closings and this and that. And so at this moment, what leaders need to know is your team is emotionally, physically, and spiritually gassed. What they need from you is they need more appreciation. They need to be given a little bit more trust. And what I'm going to say about that, and I've been hammering this in speeches. I've been hammering this because I believe that every single company had the exact same response when the pandemic hit. And it is a very typical response because it's a response that tracks to the normal anxiety response. So as we unpack anxiety, Scott, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I promise we will end up in a place where there's lots of takeaway. So anxiety, first and foremost, everybody, it's a very important thing to have in life. Yes, you heard Mel Robbins say that. Anxiety is really important because all that anxiety is anxiety is an internal alarm system that is hardwired in your nervous system. And that alarm system has one job. The alarm system called anxiety has the job of making you pay attention. That's it. There is some kind of threat, some kind of uncertainty. When anxiety races through your body, you come alive and you go into a state of hyperfocus. Your nervous system switches into your sympathetic nervous system. You immediately go on edge. Your spidey senses come up. Your prefrontal cortex engages. Your heart starts to race. All of this, by the way, tied to evolution to keep you safe. Anxiety is a good thing when there is an actual threat. Yeah. So, for example, let's say, Scott, that you and I are driving down the road and we're chatting up a storm and we're driving, to go do a speech or whatever. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a semi truck cuts right into our lane and you have to swerve, right, to get out of the way. As that semi truck, Scott, cuts into our lane, what do you feel in your body?
A rush of adrenaline, fear for my life. I need to take immediate control over my safety because that driver doesn't know I'm alive or he wouldn't have cut in my lane.
Yeah, like immediately anxiety rips through your body, and anxiety is serving a purpose. It's sounding the alarm so that you stop talking to me and you pay attention. And all of a sudden your brain takes over, you swerve without even thinking about it, and your heart races, and all the blood runs to your major organs so that you can go into a state of hyperfocus. The reason why people feel nervous or anxious or excited before a test or before a speech is because you're going into a state of hyperfocus. Anxiety, that feeling in your body, is now making you align with what you're about to do so you can focus on it and perform. In the example that I just gave you, anxiety served a purpose. And here's what's interesting. As the truck pulls away and you kind of pull back into your lane, what happens in your body now that the truck is gone and we're driving down the road safely?
In my body or my wife's body?
In your body.
Well, in my body, I would, that anxiety probably stays for a little while, not for an hour, but probably, 45 seconds or so as I begin to calm down and kind of put it into context, and we're safe, we're alive, it's not going to happen again probably immediately. So I probably recover pretty quickly, but there's a lingering effect.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the 45 seconds, because it is less than 90 seconds that most people switch from one emotional state to the other when there's intellectual context. So your body starts to slow down and it goes from the on-edge state, alert state, into what's called the parasympathetic state, which is your kind of rest and relax state, in about 90 seconds, because your brain sees the truck leave and your brain goes, oh, no threat. The problem for people today, and this is true of everybody on your team, is that we have been living in a heightened state of uncertainty. And every single person on the planet, their nervous system right now is either flipped into the fight or flight mode of feeling on edge, or it's like a trigger, immediately flips into it. And so the normal things that somebody wouldn't stress out, they're super stressed out. And this is important to understand, because I want you to, as a leader, to think about, first, let's talk about work. Assume that most people are at the end of their rope. They're trying the best that they can. They are burning the candle at both ends. They're having a hard time focusing and concentrating. And they're feeling uncertain and on edge. Because even if their work life is good, there's something going on with their kids at college. There's something going on with their kids in the high school. There's something going on with somebody in their family. And, the spike in this sense of anxiety, the spike that we're seeing in terms of people's mental health is extraordinary. And I'm sure you're hearing the same thing from corporations that I'm hearing, which is that the number one concern that people have right now at the highest level in every single company, whether they're publicly traded or they're a small family business, is the well-being of their employees. And so one thing that you can do is, number one, you can encourage people to take time off. Number two, you can consciously, as a leader, make a strategic and intentional decision to move out of the mode that your company has been in for probably 2 years, because there are 3 phases to this pandemic that has impacted every corporation on the planet and every leader on the planet. Phase number 1 was life as it used to be, right? Because when the pandemic first hit, it was sort of like, oh my gosh, what's changing about life as it used to be? What life as it used to be? We're going to go back to the way life used to be. Phase number 2 was full-on crisis. Oh my gosh, we're in this. Yeah. And what you saw is an anxiety response from every single company on the planet, because we had to. Everything got turned upside down. The rules got rewritten overnight. Everybody had to pivot and to innovate and to switch and to innovate. Like, it was incredible. And there was so much amazingness that came out of it. There's going to be, when we look back on this period, this is going to be one of the most rapid periods of innovation and disruption in a very positive way when it comes to business operations, the way that people work, like all kinds of stuff. But one of the disruptions that has been horrible for people is that companies immediately jumped to nonstop video conference calls. And what has happened for human beings who are working hybrid or working remote is that people feel like they need to always be online. And there are lots of companies that also still have a policy 2 years later that your camera is required to be on. This is a horrible thing to be doing to people. And the reason why it's a horrible thing to be doing to people is, number one, it communicates mistrust, which makes somebody who's already stressed out feel even worse. But number two, based on the brain science, here's what we know. If you're on a video conference call and you're staring at yourself, having to stare at yourself activates this part of your brain, Scott. When the prefrontal cortex is engaged, the rate at which you drain the fuel in your brain increases dramatically. The reason why it is so difficult for everybody to be productive right now, for everybody to focus. The reason why people feel more anxious, the reason why people feel more distracted, the reason why people feel like, my gosh, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I feel like I need 3 martinis and a nap. Like I have 4 more hours for the rest of the day or 10. The reason is because you are having to work in an environment that is triggering stress and anxiety and being on edge. Staring at yourself all day on camera is draining the fuel in your brain. And companies reacted so like panic mode that they haven't pulled back yet and stepped into phase 3 of the pandemic, which is, this is the new reality. Let's stop pretending there is some sort of milestone that is out in the future that's going to solve all this. And let's get strategic and let's get intentional about how we're going to work, because everything in the company can't be important or else nothing is. And every meeting can't be 50 people on a Zoom call because nobody can get work done. And we need to go back to getting intentional and strategic about what's important and going back to the basics of making sure people's weekly jobs are aligned with what matters. And we need to allow people and trust them to get their work done. That's one thing that you can do as a leader. Less Zoom calls, more appreciation, and cameras off. That's going to help people a ton when it comes to anxiety at work. The other thing that will help people a ton is triple down on appreciation. What I've figured out in researching the high five habit and having 145,000 people from 91 countries go through a 5-day online challenge that I led about the high five habit. In 5 days, Scott, not a single person reported that this high five habit didn't work. And what I've learned in researching the power of appreciation and developing habits of encouragement is that the most motivating force on the planet is to feel appreciated, to feel like somebody sees you and hears you and actually appreciates you. And I know that you talk about this a lot. People, and we're talking about the Great Resignation, right? And companies make the mistake of thinking that people are leaving organizations because they're looking for better compensation. That's not true. People leave organizations. There was a huge McKinsey study that proved this recently. They leave organizations because they don't feel valued or appreciated, and they don't feel like they belong. And so this should be a giant red flag for every leader out there. You've got the Great Resignation. You've got people really starting to think about what they value and what matters to them. You've got a hybrid work environment where it's going to take more intentionality to make people feel like they belong and to make sure that they feel appreciated. And so you've got to make sure that this is priority number one as you head into this next year, that the focus is on how do I make sure that people's work is getting recognized, that people feel visible, and that I am pointing out all the things they're doing right instead of harping on the thing that they're doing wrong. That is something that you can do that goes way beyond the corporate programs that people put in place. It's the basic blocking and tackling of making sure that everybody that reports to you feels appreciated by you. And it takes work. It takes a lot of work to build that as a muscle as a leader.
I have to tell you something. I've been in the self-help world for a long time. I gotta say, your book triggered me in the beginning, and it gave me all of the feels and ways that I was not expecting. Do you mind if I reveal to you what I sort of discovered from this process?
Yes. So are you saying that you started to read the high five habit and you got triggered?
Oh, Mel, the title alone gave me all of the feels. So
why?
So here's the thing. I'm not a high fiver. And not only am I not a high fiver, but as an adult, I usually decline if somebody wants to high five. I know.
Are you a germaphobe?
No, it goes so much deeper than this. So I grew up in a very athletic community. And as a gay 6'6" overweight kid, my memory of high fives is hearing things like, Dougal doesn't get a high five because he didn't do anything, and sort of being left out. So when I started reading the book, at first I thought, why do I have such a challenge with high fives? I like, even on the Peloton, if people high five you, not a sponsor, but they could be if they want to. If people high five you, I will ignore it. So I started the book and I really wanted to like merge into it. And so what came up for me in the beginning is sort of this past memory of, I don't belong here. I'm not a part of the team. I'm not allowed to do this. And I'm really enjoying the book. I was going to race through it before the interview, but I want to sort of savor it because it's been bringing up a lot for me. And so in the moment where I'm in the morning, and I even resisted doing it before coffee, I had a lot of resistance, Mel. You were triggering me. And I got still and I took the challenge. And the first thing that I noticed is you cannot not smile. I immediately smile and it immediately makes me feel good. And by day 3 or day 4, I'm going to get emotional. By day 3 or day 4, what came up for me was, I'm in this game. And it may not be a lacrosse game, and I'm not going to cry. And it may not be like a soccer game, but I'm a 44-year-old man now. Like, I'm in this game and we can celebrate ourselves. Who knew?
Who knew? It's been a wildly confronting process to not only discover this thing called the high five habit, but to unpack all of the science and research that explains A, why we resist it, B, why it's hard not to smile or cry or laugh when you do it, and C, why it has such a profound impact on people. And you know what I'll say is, number one, you're the first person that I've talked to that has brought up a negative memory around high fives. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to talk to you about it. And given that you have this negative association with a high five based on your lived experience, and you still push through the resistance, and you also were able to feel the impact of it, proves even further to me why this is such a profound habit. And the reason why is because it works from the inside out.
Yes.
And even though those bastards teased you and bullied you and left you out of receiving a high five, and so your lived experience and association when you thought about it was negative, the fact is that your brain's neural association and your nervous system's programmed association with a high five was still profoundly positive.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to own my own. What I realize as I'm sort of going through this process is I think I've perhaps even designed situations where I've either mentally left myself out or designed it so that I feel left out. Because I thought, now, why would I reject a high five? Because I celebrate it when I see other people doing it. But I still think there's that shadow side, inner child thing of, it feels like someone's handing me a lacrosse stick at first. And I don't play lacrosse, but now it's like, no, I can, and I consider myself someone that wants to uplift other people and give energy to other people. And obviously it goes deeper into just the high five in the morning. It's about self-care and congratulating yourself. And that's a struggle for me. So it was really interesting to give myself permission to do it.
It goes even deeper because it's actually about self-worth.
Yeah.
And about self-love. And, you know, I want to unpack something that you just talked about, which is, as you've been reflecting on the fact that it's not really just about, you know, this represents what people who play lacrosse do. This actually represents something deeper because it represents acceptance. It represents support. It represents celebration. And it doesn't surprise me, given the amount of bullying and badgering and crap that you have had to take as a 6'6", overweight kid who is also gay, proudly gay, but you grew up in a time where it was not celebrated by your peers and not something that was the norm.
Right.
And so, I want to acknowledge that when you are somebody whose very existence is bullied and who feels like he doesn't belong because the laws say that you don't, or because the kids treat you differently, you develop protection mechanisms.
Yes.
And one of the biggest ones is to just pull yourself out and to be in the corner and to hide who you are because it's safer.
Yeah.
That way you don't get bullied. That way you don't get badgered. And so, first of all, give yourself you get a gold star for the fact that you're recognizing it. Yep. Secondly, the high five in that lane when you're somebody who is coming into and back to yourself, right? And when you're somebody who now realizes that you deserve to be fully seen for who you are. When you start to high five yourself, what happens is it's not like a fuck yeah, like a sounds like, oh, like, bro. That's not what the high five habit is actually.
Right.
It's actually grounded in compassion and empathy and support of self. And so the reason why you smiled when you did it is because your brain doesn't know the difference between watching somebody else high five someone else or receiving a high five or giving a high five to someone else and you high fiving yourself.
Yeah.
To your brain, the physical action becomes the trigger that unlocks all of this lifetime neural association with the high five. Now, you cognitively were like, screw the high five. That's for dickhead lacrosse players and those.
Right. Wouldn't even give myself a chance at first.
Get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your brain still recognizes this as that gesture that people that like each other do to one another. So when you physically raise your hand to high five yourself, you can't think anything negative because your brain grabs all the programming that's already in your subconscious and then starts to marry it with your own reflection. So I'm not surprised that you're starting to have breakthroughs around, wow, I've really taken myself out in certain areas of my life. Wow, I'm so hard on myself. Wow, why is it so hard to stand in front of the mirror and actually raise my hand in celebration? And, we can unpack that too.
And I went into a hot flash. I went into it kicking and screaming because, I also am a big believer in the way you start your day, start your energy. And one of the things you say is even before your cup of coffee, which triggered me, Mel. This triggered me.
Why did it trigger you?
Well, coffee fuels my soul. But what I discovered was that even the act of pouring a cup of coffee is taking me away from myself first. I'm going to the kitchen, the dog is there. I'm, having a conversation with my husband. So making it a priority to go to the bathroom first, to just be with myself and sleep gunk and all the stuff in my eyes and all of that before the coffee, before any stimulant of noise or any energy outside of my own being. I resisted it. We're talking about
what? Let me tell you why.
Tell me. Dissect me.
So I love that you just said that you're a huge proponent of the morning, and morning routines and setting yourself up for success and your energy in the morning. And you are right. All the research shows that your mood in the morning and your intention in the morning actually impacts productivity and focus and fulfillment all day long. So you're absolutely right. And I'm so happy you said this because there's not a single person on the planet that I know of that is talking about the fact that everybody's morning routine contains a disgusting, destructive habit. And nobody has kicked the door wide open until right now.
What is it?
And let me tell you what the habit is. Before you read my book, when you walked into the bathroom and you were brushing your teeth, did you even look at yourself in the mirror?
I did, but not kindly.
Okay, I'm glad that you're being honest.
Yeah.
When you looked in the mirror, what did you think or what did you focus on?
I struggle with body dysmorphic disorder. My audience knows this. I write about it and speak about it openly. So there is a moment of distortion, which I could relate to you talking about this in the book too, where at first I'm criticizing my body. And not only am I criticizing my body, but I'm thinking of what's going to make me feel good. Coffee gives me my coffee dance, is what I call it. I get excited. I get motivated. I certainly meditate, but the visual, meditating is closing my eyes. I'm not looking at myself. The visual of looking at myself, if I'm going to be completely honest, was more triggering than I expected it to be.
Okay, well, I wanna give you a sense that you're not alone in this. So when I discovered the high five habit during a very low moment in my life in April of 2020, and it just was something I did on a low morning, like you, where I'm standing in front of the mirror and I'm focused on everything I hate about the way that I look, and I'm beating myself up and I'm thinking about my day and I'm already criticizing the fact that I'm running late and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And I just raise my hand and give the woman in the mirror that I see a high five because she looks like she needed it. She looks like life had beaten her down. She looked overwhelmed and exhausted. And I honestly just didn't have any words to say. And I probably wouldn't have believed him anyway, because in April of 2020, my whole life was turned upside down. And so I didn't feel energized. I didn't feel empowered. I felt defeated. I felt lost. I felt overwhelmed. And, I think we can all relate to that feeling.
Yeah.
And so that's how it all began. And as it started to work, and I noticed, like you're noticing, whoa, I feel more energized. Whoa, like I'm not criticizing myself. Wow, something weird is happening. I then post a photo online, and within an hour, more than 100 people around the world had posted a photo of them high-fiving themselves in the mirror. And I hadn't even put instructions
Right. They're
on
just
it.
mimicking what you did.
Mimicking. And
Yeah.
I thought, okay, there's something here. So I spent the last year researching this.
Yeah. I love when you nerd out. Tell us the nerdy part of why it works. I love this stuff.
Well, let me first tell you that you're not alone in the mirror. So the disgusting habit that every single human being, like, I don't care who you are, where you live, what your education is, how much money you have, everybody has this habit. It is a habit of self-rejection. 50% of people cannot even look at themselves in the mirror. That's men and women. 50%, because they are disgusted by what they see, or they are sad about where they're at. 50% based on our research. That's number one. Now, we know that 91% of women do not like how they look. And so if you can look at yourself in the mirror, you're in the minority. And if you do look at yourself in the mirror, what we know based on research is almost everybody focuses on what they don't like. And so, if you can't even look at yourself, that is rejection of self,
Right.
and it's a habit. And if you look in the mirror and you see all the things that you hate or need to fix, that is also a habit of self-rejection. And everybody has it. And nobody's talking about it. And what the high five habit actually does at its deepest level is it teaches you, using simple science, to break the habit of self-rejection and to replace it with a habit of self-acceptance, self-validation, and when you repeat this over time, a habit of self-love and self-worth. And so here's why this feels weird. The reason why high-fiving yourself in the mirror feels weird is that you are breaking that habit of self-rejection. And whenever you are practicing any new habit, it always feels weird. That's how you know it's working.
Right.
If I lost my right hand today in a car accident and I had to write with my left hand, it would feel weird.
Right.
And it feels weird, not necessarily because it's new. It feels weird because the habit is now requiring me to plow new connections in my brain that aren't there right now. If your brain is currently wired to reject yourself, to go, ugh, when you see yourself in the mirror, it's going to feel weird to look at yourself for a second and then practice an action that says acceptance, belief, and love. That's why it feels weird. And so the reason why you resist it too is because there's this other habit that we have of judgment.
Yeah.
And in the bathroom every morning, I want you to consider you're actually not standing before your reflection. I want you to consider that you are in the bathroom with another person. That's a human being in the mirror. And that human being is trying very hard. And they are beaten down by your constant criticism and your hatred and your critiquing and you're focusing on what's going wrong. And they need you to wake up, and they need you to start to see them and to cheer for them and to support them. They need that from you.
This is where the words that were floating through my mind are, is you are in this game. And if I may say, as it was building, not only am I in this game, but I'm sort of killing it. Like, not gonna lie, like, I love my life. Things are going well. And why would I continue these old tapes? And what's interesting to me as a spiritual teacher, I'm also a teacher as well.
I know.
That I love when you talk about your struggle, because I have a real issue with toxic positivity. And a lot of times in spiritual communities, I might say to colleagues or friends, I've been a little anxious lately. And I feel like everyone like repels back and it's like, oh no, we can't have a negative thought right now. And, you know, I'm a human being. Yes, I connect with people. Yes, I love to get motivated, but you know, it's been a hard year and a half. There's been a lot of energy on the planet. And I think sometimes when I'm in the stillness of my own being, those quiet moments early in the morning, looking in the mirror, I save some of that negativity and maybe it festers a little bit versus sort of talking about it through the day. And so I love when you talk about your struggle, you're very, very honest about your relationship with that anxiety and stuff like that. And it's really refreshing and so necessary right now.
Well, I actually think the reason why you're negative is because it's just a habit.
Yeah.
I really think that you, like most of us, at some point, we go from these perfect, whole, complete beings that come into this world hardwired for celebration and self-love, confidence, and resilience. You know, you never see a baby take a step back from a mirror and go, God, my thighs are fat. Like, you just, like, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And at some point, whether it's because of abuse and trauma and criticism in your home, or what happens to absolutely everyone is when you enter school and the driving survival mechanism is to fit in somehow.
Yes.
Your brain goes from a self-love machine into becoming that sorting hat from Harry Potter. Where if you've ever, you know, we can all remember back to that moment in elementary school where you've got your tray in the cafeteria and you're looking around for where you want to sit and your heart is pulling you towards the group that you want to go to. But the sorting hat brain, who's just trying to protect you, is like, you can't go over there. Those are the lacrosse kids. Oh, you can't go over there. You don't look like them. Oh, you can't go over there because you don't have the same kind of clothing or money or whatever. And your brain is just trying to keep you safe.
Right.
But you start the habit of rejection of self from a very young age. And it's just become a pattern. That's all that it is. Like, you're not broken if you criticize yourself.
Right.
You have a pattern that is broken. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.